So I'm here again, and I'm doing this again. And already I'm facing the discomfort that I knew would be here of not having something to get off my shoulders, really. Not having a tremendous weight that I'm using this medium to kind of shake off. But with no plan and seemingly no conviction in that way, this still felt like something that I needed to be doing right now, today, and something that I should be doing. Like, this felt like the thing to do right now. And it's interesting why, I think I'm not exactly sure how to put it. Not in any sort of flow. Here's a baseball bat. That's cool. That'll distract from my lack of preparation for fishing. There you go. But yeah, it's just feeling like any anxiety or whatever, like any lack of preparation or like caveats to this that I'm choosing to talk about, I think I know that they aren't actually problems, and I know that ahead of time before doing this. Because if they were actually problems, I would either habitually avoid them, or less likely I would try to solve them. But I didn't do either, I didn't avoid doing this, and I didn't try to solve the case of anticipating not having something to really talk about. I think the reason for that is that I understand, like, the way this works is that like anything you feel is like a lack or a problem with it that can itself solve the problem, like the identification of it can solve it. In that feeling like this is a problem provides content for me to speak about, and the problem is not having something to speak about. So it's like it solves itself. There's a beer bottle, another distraction. Right, so it's something that solves itself, and it's also like, I think, being aware beforehand of just like the immense satisfaction of just saying things, like just saying anything at all, even if it's kind of could be regarded as meaningless or as something that doesn't make sense. Just saying anything. Like, just saying anything is a gratifying thing, or it feels like that to me. And I think another reason why I maybe want to do this, I mean, I do think that it ties into like a sense of ego, or like a sense of fulfilling some like conception of who I am and what I do or what I should be doing. In doing this, I'm not like I'm not like in this action and in the anticipation of, in the preparation for it, or the lack thereof. I'm not conceiving of myself as like I have no self, and I have no there's we're all one and I have no self. Like that isn't the mode that I'm basing it off. A lot of it is trying to relieve myself of the guilt and kind of anxiety that comes with knowing that you could be producing something and spending so much time not producing anything. And so it's like doing this is trying to relieve some of that pressure a little bit. But what's interesting is that I set that up with kind of saying that like there was a negative connotation to, oh, another reason might be an ego thing, but why should it be a negative thing, the fact that I feel an urge to do something or to make something, and then I go and try to do that? Like why do I have a little bit of that self-critical disposition towards that? And I think it's interesting. I think I have that with a lot of things, that if I just try to kind of like withdraw from myself and from my kind of single person worldview, it's like it's very clear that a lot of things I'm critical of myself over are just like not things that I should be, you know? Like I'm very bothered by it just I'm always, if I'm having a conversation with one other person and there's like one or more other people present, I'm very conscious of those other people and the possibility that they might be overhearing what I'm saying to this other person, even though I'm not interacting with them. And it would make more sense to not really be considering them if they're not like a factor in this conversation, and especially if the subject matter isn't about them and is impossible to really offend them, you know? So it's like there's really no chance of hurting them by what I'm talking about, but I'm still self-conscious about what I'm saying and the way that it comes off to them, and like the way that what I'm saying to this other person who isn't really aware of my self-consciousness of the other people in the room or the space, the way that what I'm saying to them can like shape and mold those other people's views of me. But that's also just, and I think it's also just so, it's such a solid thing in my head that that's what's going on. And I think it would make sense that most of the time that isn't. But I just don't know. Like, I don't know. So yeah, it's like this weird point where I feel like I've made a tremendous amount of growth and like cutting out habits of worrying about things which I shouldn't, you know? But it's still a problem for me. And I still, like, I've been told I have like perception anxiety, which I don't even know if that's a real term, but it makes sense. It's something I worry about a lot, whether I present that way or manifest that way. Like I think like I've made a lot of growth in just just speaking with people and not feeling nervous about that. But there's a huge separation between what manifests to them and what I kind of like hide on the inside, the way I feel on the inside. But this whole like tangent just doesn't feel good. Like, it doesn't feel what I should be talking about. I think it's too personal. It gets a little bit into like diary, like video diary territory, where it's just me talking about, hold on, I'm gonna take my coat off, like me talking about problems in my life and failing to relate it to anything bigger than me, that in turn could be relatable to anyone like watching this, or just anyone else at all. And I don't really like that. Not that I think I should just kind of like ban myself from ever referencing anything personal, but I don't think it should be the core of this activity. Because again, it's like my decision to talk about that stuff spawns from my like the lack of substance that I'm able to bring about like the grander things, which I feel much more interested. It's just they're harder to get at. Things like that are harder to get at and harder to communicate. Yeah, so it's like I have like a little bit of concern about maybe my whole thing about my lack of preparation was fine. Like, that could have been a little bit compensational, like trying to force that reality a little bit. But it's also like I don't know. I feel like I'm the one shaping the outcome, you know, rather than the other way around. Like, this thing will just go from whatever point I'm at right now. So like the standard vision of like high quality, just a spectrum of high quality to low quality is not like it exists here, but it's not, it's a little harder to pin down, I think. I mean, I have like to touch on something that's far less personal and does apply to everything and everyone. Like, I really do not know how to say this without like there's so much like I just get so scared of like how much cliche is in here. Like I was gonna say, I've been bothered by time, and then just being like kind of repulsed with how I don't even want to say the words like emo or edgy, but how emo or edgy that statement kind of sounds. Like I've been bothered by time, but I think I have, and it's like and it's like all of the alternate approaches of like, well, first I guess what I've been bothered by is it's I don't even have any flow going with what I'm trying to say, even though it's something I like I do feel strongly about this, but I just don't. I think because at this moment I'm not at the height of my kind of suffering from that type of concept, but like I feel like I have a good grip on it right now. But of course it's something that just comes back and then goes away again and then comes back, so it's like I can't really just refer to it as something that doesn't exist and therefore isn't worth talking about, or no longer exists and isn't worth talking about therefore. Like it's just this mind state that kind of entraps me sometimes, and it dictates the way that I perceive like my actions and the actions of everyone surrounding me and just in the world. Like going into a grocery store and just immediately, like upon seeing like the people working on it, just thinking about like the work that they're doing is part of a this kind of like hopelessly cyclical thing, you know, like of stocking things only for those things to be, you know, taken and needing restocking, and that just continues kind of indefinitely with no like grander point. But I'm also like, I also feel a little uncomfortable with this because I feel recently like I've kind of been developing like a counterpoint to that way of thinking, because like for example, I work at a grocery store, and I noticed that when I'm the one working and I'm actually like focused on what I'm doing, even if it's mundane, and even if it's one of those things where if I saw someone else doing the same thing, I would be like hopelessly depressed for myself and for them, like a kind of like I would experience a sort of empathetic suffering, you know, for just because it's like I see someone working and I see their body language and I see that like positionally they probably aren't satisfied, and I like, it's like a piece of that misery gets kind of like exuded to me as I am close to them. But it's also like when I'm actually doing the work and not observing it and not just spectating it with no like skin in the game, so to speak, like all of these conceptions just don't really apply. And if they do, they're much weaker, you know, because it's like, but this just isn't that interesting to me either. Like I don't, like like these are things that are in days past have felt like incredibly profound and important and like worthy of real consideration. But now that I'm talking about them with absolutely like no limitation on my ability to think of them. Like, I'm in this space alone where I don't have like a rush or somewhere to rush, and I don't have someone else present to feel like self-conscious about if I'm like speaking too much or like not making sense. It's just like the conditions are ideal for just talking about something like this, and it's still it still isn't giving. It's not giving. I was gonna say it still isn't giving it to me, but I like the term it's not giving. This isn't giving. Why isn't it giving? I want it to give. I wish this was giving. It's really a shame that this isn't giving. But like I know too that its state of not giving right now is just, that's just the state right now, and it's just temporary, and it's like entirely possible and almost like kind of predictable that this will develop into something that does give if I stick with it long enough, you know? Like, I'm only 20 minutes in. I'm gonna avoid this area. I probably shouldn't be here. Because being confronted by like some personnel and then having to stop this to deal with that would not be giving. Like, that would be giving even less. Yeah, so it's like, it doesn't have to be giving everything that it could give in the first 20 minutes or so. It's just something that, just from my experience of watching these types of videos, like, it's the case a lot of the times that it starts out like an uphill climb, and then there's some flow established, and I guess that's what I'm relying on. Part of me is like wondering if some of the struggle with this format is that like it's structured such that like I feel like I need to be making sense, and then that limits the possibilities of the things I can say or do, you know? Like, in order to make sense, you have to you gotta tuck yourself into a little ball and like fit into like a slot, you know? But at the same time, this isn't one of those mind states I'm in where I feel like all there is just like nonsense, you know, or nonsensical things. Like, I feel like there is some sort of sense in this whole thing. In that there's some sort of consistency, and there's some sort of pattern in like what I find to be fulfilling and rewarding and what I don't, and what, like, those types of things, you know? And it's like it's not like something I find incredibly fulfilling one day just appears to me as the most meaningless thing you could do ever the next. Although that would fit into that format of nonsense, but that doesn't seem really to be the case at all. But I guess one of the questions with that, or like the caveats, is like, if the things I identify as fulfilling are always as such, then why do I have such trouble like doing them and aligning myself with them a lot of the time. Like, why do I have this kind of natural resistance, you know? Why am I still so likely on a day where I don't have work or school? Why am I still so likely to like go on my phone and just use it for not too long, but a little bit, like after waking up, before getting out of bed? And it's not to say that like I'm trying to promote some like grind set of like, fuck your phone, like, you know, wake up and take a cold shower at 5 a.m. while your peers are sleeping or anything. Like, that's not what I'm trying to promote. It's just I've found that it feels better and it's more conducive with like a higher amount of well-being if I choose to like do things upon the first opportunity to do them. Like just shower and eat right away. But there are so many times when I do that and it's like I do that and I don't really have trouble doing it. But then after completing both of those things, I ride on that kind of satisfaction of like having done that without any like bumps. And so then I just I developed this inertia of like not doing really anything, you know, like still, but like it's like I in that not doing anything, I'm like passively consuming stuff, but the stuff that I'm consuming is like things that are like stimulating and meaningful to me. So it isn't like complete like hogwash or whatever. Like it isn't just complete like, I don't know, just like empty bullshit that I'm looking at. But at the same time, it's like I'm always aware somewhere in the back of my head or the side of it or the middle of it even that like I could be doing something better, you know. But it's hard when you have all that time and you don't have any excuses of like, oh well, like I had to work today or anything like that. You don't have, if this is a case where, if it's a case where you don't have any excuses like that, it can be very hard to like actually do the meaningful shit that you know you should be doing. And it's like, that's unfortunate, but those, like, I don't know, those realities still seem like, they don't seem bothersome to me, you know? Like I feel like net optimistic about things. Even though if you asked me 3 days ago, I would have like provided a completely different answer, you know? One that would be more like hopeless about like where the way that things are going. Not necessarily like myself, but just things in general. But it's also like, even to make that assertion like implies some level of authority that is kind of like, I would be lying if it didn't feel like I'm an imposer to act like I have that, you know? Or like an imposter. Like I don't know, you know? Like I don't know the way that things are going. Or not the way that things are, I don't know the way things are gonna be. I don't know. And it's weird, it's like that state of not knowing is kind of like, whoa, holy shit, I almost just fell. That state of not knowing is like a little bit glamorized, I think, by people who like, they find it to be incredibly like profound or unique to claim like, you know, the wisest men know that they know nothing or something like that. But it's just like, it's like then you're just kind of like marketing that, you know? like you're taking what could be seen as like a truth that's very pure and real and meaningful, and you're just like smudging it with like a marketing allure, you know, like the wisest men know nothing, and then like it's just like in an attempt to boost your your ego in your own head and in the heads of others, or your perception in the heads of others. You like buy into that, like all I know is that I know nothing. But it's like, I think part of it is that a lot of the times that's bought into by people who haven't like gone through kind of the lifelong experience of like dedicating yourself to being someone who knows something, and then just being faced with and struggling with years to resist, and eventually coming to terms with the reality that like you don't know things. And I don't even know who said that, and I don't even know if that's the actual quote, but it's like I would be surprised if the person or the people who said that weren't people who went through their life like riding on some structure of having to know things, and then eventually coming to terms with the fact that they think they don't. I would be surprised if the person who said that was like a 21-year-old who's attempting some kind of attempting to get at some kind of nuance, you know. So in that way, it's like, yeah, it's just like co-opting some idealized phrase without having gone through the experience to like fully be aligned with that. But it's also it's like, why is that a problem, you know? Like, why am I like, why do I have this kind of like attacking, sardonic like view of these people who, like I said, like a 20, like that's a person who's older than me, you know? It's almost like my disdain for those types of people, like it would logically follow that is in some way birthed from or projected out from like an awareness of my own kind of like co-opting mindsets and phrases from others. But that's something that you can just like deliberate on forever, and it becomes just like this like pit of nothingness where like nothing is really more true than the other. But this isn't I'm bored with this right now. What am I not bored with? And that's not even just like, I don't know, that's like, it sounded so not, but that was like a genuine inquiry, because whatever I'm not bored with, like that's what I want to get into, because it's not like I'm over everything and I'm bored with everything. Although I do like sometimes have like glimpses of a mind state where that could be the case for someone, where like you feel over everything, but I never stay there, you know. I never stay there long enough for that to be concretized. Like that's never really the case for me, because as soon as I'm there, within a few days I'm hit with the other side of the coin, and like just like the gorgeousness being alive and being able to like experience stuff, you know. Yeah, it still isn't giving, you know. I still feel like there's a part of me who's like the overseer of the other part of me who is the one speaking, and the overseer is like not the overseer like has a clipboard, and the overseer is listening extremely close to what the speaker is speaking, and the overseer is just not feeling it, you know. Like the overseer thinks that what the speaker is saying is just kind of like miles behind what's like the current up-to-date state of the building they teach in, which is my brain, you know. And it's like the problem for the speaker, and you know, he'll make sure to say this to the overseer after this is over, is that, or at least to somehow communicate it, is the problem for the speaker is that like the current stuff that's the most in alignment with any like profundity or anything is like it's hard to communicate with words, but also that gives off the impression that like it's another one of those things that you try to like forcibly heighten by saying words can't describe it, and it's not really that either. And like I think the overseer is like a little bit the grimace on his face shrank just a little bit when the speaker started talking about something on kind of a higher level of depth than what he had been talking about the entire time. But he's still you know an active skeptic of this entire presentation. But there's, you know, that the slight shrinking of his grimace provides just a glimmer of hope, you know. And now the speaker is starting to think out loud a little bit, because rather than suppress his anxieties about what the overseer is thinking, he's just vocalizing them with the overseer present, and with the kind of questionable, like mean, authoritative light that it paints the overseer in. He's still vocalizing it for the overseer to witness, you know? So that represents a sort of confidence that the speaker is kind of mustering, and it's his hope that confidence will have a snowball effect, and just surmount any level of confidence he's had during these events ever. Because now that he's able to be fully transparent with his thoughts about the overseer, he wants to mention that he finds it extremely extremely strange that he can't quite place whether or not he's met this overseer before or not. Whether or not they have ever shared they've ever been in the same space. You know, have they ever shook hands? Have they ever even merged, you know? Have they ever traded places? Has the speaker ever been the overseer? And vice versa. And he doesn't know, you know? Like, he would love to pretend to know for the amplification of this like kind of metacog sense that the overseer is a little bit pleased to see that the speaker's getting at, but to say that he would know just wouldn't. I think the overseer would understand that's not the truth, you know, and he would disapprove of that. So it's like he's also finding it interesting to like attack directly the foundation upon which this overseer holds his role as the overseer. Like, in what circumstances was he appointed to power, you know? Like, who died and called him, I don't even know the saying. Who died and made you the boss, or whatever it is? That's what the speaker's wondering, aloud. And he's not even bothered by the fact that the overseer is witnessing this and possibly can be offended by it, you know? Who made you the boss? Why am I the speaker? And why are you the overseer, you know? And why does, like, your judgment of everything that's going on here reign so supreme over the entire building? And why in my brief moments of silence do you like kind of like tighten your grip of control over like the conception of what's going on and the public opinion of what's going on and the approval rating? Why in silence are you so much more able to lower the approval rating of what's going on here, you know? But it's like, I'm glad that that's how it is, and I'm glad that that's a consistent pattern, because it provides like an immensely obvious kryptonite of yours, and that's just speaking, you know? Like, if I as a speaker continue to speak and continue to attack directly like the structures on which you like hold your power, and the structures on which you got it in the first place, and the structures upon which you'll maintain it, and I try to, you know, maintain this level of transparency with what I'm thinking about this, that might be the only chance, you know? Down with the overseer, says I, and says all. But I will admit, and this kind of goes against the momentum of this movement, you know? I will admit that the thought crossed my mind of a brain in a building without an overseer, and what that would look like and how it would operate. you know? Like how would this operate, and how would my conception of quality, or our conception of quality, how would that be like kind of irreversibly changed if the overseer just there was no overseer in this brain, in this building? I'm wondering, and I'm tempted to think, or I'm tempted to say what I'm reluctant to, in that I don't really think the removal of an overseer here, or like a force, like a coup of the overseer, in the long run, it wouldn't do the brain and it wouldn't do the building good. Like to have a sharp and critical overseer is, yes, to like live under the guise of like an authority figure who like has kind of the ultimate power in approving or disapproving and all that goes on within the brain and within the building, but there's some sort of necessary structure provided in that would be that would, you know, there would be like terrible consequences if that structure was lost following the removal of an, or even just like the like voluntary resignation of an overseer, you know? Because then it's like, it sounds at first, you know, like, or it sounds just in fantasy like a wonderful thing to not have like a critical smudge, or like a stain of doubt be placed on such a large amount of the things like that we say, or that the speaker says, and that, you know, the members of the brain and the members of the building corresponding that they do. But it's hard to ignore like the lingering sense that fun and that state of relief would be very short-lived, like upon realizing the other problems that come with like the lack of an overseer, you know? Like, if there were no overseer, all that was said and all that was done within the brain and the building and the correspondence between the two, as they're one and the same, all that would be said and would be done would be like marked not with any evaluation of quality, and thus there would be no like despite the conception that all would be good, like the concept of good would be like more meaningless than ever, you know? Because there's nothing to hold it in opposition to. Like, there would be no motivation to improve your work and edit it and tweak it and remold it with the hopes of fitting some requisite for good a little bit more closely, and there would be no fulfillment in the instances where you do, like, where that works out, where you do that and it works. There would just be like this kind of like empty smile, or empty like smattering of approval, like patterned on every idea that was produced. And that would like effectively like level the playing field in a way that like there could be no great moments, you know, or there could be no great ideas. And as I'm saying these things, and I'm getting so far into this like projected future, I'm being told by the overseer, who by the way is still present, because that was all, you know, that was all like an exercise of imagination. This overseer who is still present, his grimace has now shrunken considerably, you know, not just a small amount. Like his grimace can no longer even be described as a grimace, you know. It's now just like a neutral, like it's even past the territory of a frown, you know, of a slight frown. It's in some state of neutrality now, and I'm feeling with like great, like realistic confidence that if I continue at this rate, and we continue supporting this at this rate, that state of neutrality in his the positioning of his mouth will like transcend into a state of like maybe even a slight smile, you know, or just like the tips of his dimples will like turn up just a little bit, and just the faintest smile, and his eyes will like the tips of his eyes and the bags towards the side of them will, you know, will clench themselves just a little bit in like a very faint indication of a smile, in the way the eyes do. But who's to say that he even has a mouth, you know, or that he even has eyes? Because as I was wondering, or as I was kind of fretting over, I have no recollection of meeting him, and yet I have no confident like basis on which to assert that I have never met him. Like, I just don't know. It's possible, but it's like you have to understand that not having a recollection of having done something is not the equivalent of that thing never having been done by you, right? Because if that were the case, then the absence of, or the lack of a recollection of having met the overseer would in my case imply that that's the truth and that I hadn't. But if you notice, I said with equal confidence, and I said in the same pace and in the same frame, that I also had, you know, no confidence or assuredness that I had never met him, because maybe I have. But because I don't have a recollection of doing so, any conception of him as someone who's having a mouth to grimace with, or to be in a state of neutrality with, or to turn upwards into a slight smile with, or having eyes to indicate a slight smile or a faint smile, like any notion of that can't be. Or it can be, but it can only be in imagination. I don't know where he is, and I don't know what he looks like, or if he looks at all, you know? Like, if he looks like something at all, like if he has any form that can be regarded with eyes. And it's interesting because, like, being on that subject just kind of brings about this impossible to ignore thought of I call myself the speaker, you know, but I don't even have any sureness that I have a mouth to speak with either, you know. I've never seen it. Like, I've never seen a mouth, or my mouth for that instance. I think I hear myself saying things, but I've never seen my mouth. It's weird. And I'm scanning, and no one that I see is offering me any like condolence or any certainty that what I'm saying isn't just kind of like a knee-jerk worry, you know. Like, all I'm receiving are like solemn looks from eyes that I don't even know are eyes. Like solemn, all-knowing looks that seem to indicate like the ethos of these looks are, he knows, he's figured it out. But there are no looks to begin with, you know? There aren't any looks. There aren't any looks, and I'm not receiving any, you know? And even if there were looks, and I were to be, like, there were looks being projected at me with the intention of me receiving them, I would have no basis upon which to do so. Like, I would have, or no means through which I could receive any looks, you know? Because I don't have eyes either. Like, I don't have any eyes, so how could I observe that other people's looks, which aren't even looks, are casting like a solemn, like, all-knowing disposition upon what I'm saying? I don't have eyes to do that. And the people don't have eyes to cast these looks with, you know? Look, there aren't any eyes. And I'm going back to like what seemed at the time like a minor detail about the overseer's analysis of what's going on and his kind of judgment of it. And I remember mentioning that he had a clipboard on which he was like writing notes and evaluating this performance, but I don't recall seeing any clipboards ever, you know? Like, I don't remember there being any clipboards. What are clipboards? There aren't any clipboards anywhere. How can you write something down on a thing that doesn't exist? Like, there aren't any clipboards. How did he write his evaluations on a clipboard? Because there aren't any. It doesn't make sense. It's just nonsense, you know? He didn't have a clipboard to write on, or a writing utensil to write with, or anything on his body to attach to like through which the writing utensil could be the hybrid. Even if there was a writing utensil and it was, you know, supposedly acting as a hybrid between himself and the clipboard, and even if there, like, we can even go as far as saying, even if there were a clipboard, you know, we can even suppose that there were a clipboard and it existed and it was real, and there was also a writing utensil and that also existed and also was real. like both of those things aren't true, but we can even go so far as pretending they are just for this exercise. And it was impossible because the overseer doesn't have anything with which he could be writing, you know? Like, for someone to write something, usually you need a hand or an arm, you know? Or in rare cases, like a foot, but he doesn't have any of those things, you know? And before you think it, he also doesn't possess any, like, supernatural intelligence through which he could, like, write things with his mind or anything. He doesn't have that either. He doesn't have anything, you know? And he's not, like, he isn't something that you can, like, perceive of or conceive of. But yet it's like, I'm sure that he exists. I'm sure of it. He exists in such a weird state that, like, he's the only thing that exists that is impossible to be, like, accurately described. Because, like, there aren't any traits of his character, and there aren't any, like, physical traits of his form that can be, like, experienced or, like, or just like looked at or, like, noticed, because he doesn't have anything. But yet he still exists, and he still runs the building. He runs the building, and he plans to do so forever. Like, he's not gonna stop, you know, because, like, there is no, like, this isn't even to say that I dislike the overseer, but let's just pretend for a second that I'm someone who did, you know? And maybe in that instance, I would be clinging on to some small hope that, like, one day retirement would be a thing for the overseer. But even if that were the case, and even if I were someone who didn't like him, and even if I were clinging on to hope that he would, you know, I wouldn't have to worry about him anymore once he retires eventually, like, he has nothing. He has none of the things that cause people to retire in the first place. You know, like, there are a few major factors that cause people to retire, and one of them is, like, the aging and deterioration of, like, their physical form. Like, their body is not working as well as it used to. But he doesn't have one, so that's completely out the window. Like, you can't hope on, like, oh, he's getting older, like, his knees are getting weak, he might throw in the towel soon. He's never gonna throw in the towel because he doesn't have any knees to get weak, and he doesn't have any self to get older. And so there's that. And then, like, another huge reason, these are probably the two biggest reasons why people retire, right? One is their like physical deterioration, and the second is just like a tiredness with working, and like a warranted sense of deserving to stop working, you know, after having done it for like a huge chunk of their life, you know. Like, you get exhausted and it's something you've saved up to, so it's like, maybe after working for such a long time that there are no records of how long he's worked, only rumors, you know, but maybe there could be some hope that he would eventually grow tired mentally of working, and he would find more and more satisfaction in like the thought of like not having to work anymore, and just like being by himself, or not necessarily being by himself, because like there is no self for him to be by, and there is, like, the opposition to that is to be with people, and like there are no people for him to be with either, you know. But just to spend time not working, although there isn't any time to not, like, to spend not working, just like there isn't any time to spend working. So just in that you can dismantle it. But even if we didn't, like, go there, he doesn't have any, like, conception of, like, exhaustion that builds up over the years, because there aren't any years, first of all, and there, well, also there isn't any exhaustion. But even if there were exhaustion and there were years, which there aren't, even if there were, like, he would not, like, those are two factors that he would not be, like, at the mercy to, you know, at the mercy of, excuse me, like that wouldn't be something, those wouldn't be factors that cause him to want to retire either. So it's like, you have to understand that he won't be retiring, and that's a fact that really tells you that if you're bothered by that fact, probably the best course of action is to pretend not to be, because he's still like he still controls the brain, you know, like there's still someone controlling the brain. It isn't just like, it hasn't, like, yet deteriorated into any, like, fantastical, like anarchy turned like commune where everyone just shares wealth and distributes it equally. Like, that hasn't happened, because the brain is still working, you know, and, like, he's still in charge of it, and any like any material characteristics that can be found in any, like, people, which there aren't any people, but, like, if there were, any of their material characteristics, like, don't apply to him. They aren't something that, like, he isn't on that continuum, you know, like, he's not gonna, like, his back isn't gonna give out one day, because he doesn't have a back. And so now I have, before I even talk about, like, his state on, like, the grimace to smile continuum, I have to, like, preface that I'm not even sure, and I'm pretty sure he doesn't have a mouth with which he could grimace or smile or be in a state of neutrality. But I'm still gonna say that I have this deep sense that he's like his faint smile has grown a little bit less faint upon hearing all of this, you know, like, this is all, like, you have to remember that, like, even though I'm talking about things that seem to, like, supersede this setting, like, we're still in this setting, and, like, this is still part of the presentation, which is still being evaluated by the person who I'm giving it on, you know. So it's like, you have to refrain from thinking of me as someone who is, like, able to speak really freely about what I'm thinking, despite the fact that I have told you multiple times that that's what I'm doing. You have to, like, maintain some kind of critical thinking with what's going on here, because you have to remember that, like, this presentation is still being, like, graded. It's a graded presentation. It isn't just like a diary entry where it's like, where no one else is gonna see this. Like, it's being seen right now. And, like, you're confused as to, like, whether that was, like, a side tangent or whether that was, like, part of the part of the presentation, because didn't I just say that like that you have to remember that like there are a lot of thoughts that I understand I can't really like insert into this presentation because it's still being observed? Didn't I just say that? But didn't I just like a few moments before, or maybe a while before, talk about how I'm achieving this level of transparency despite maybe the fear of doing so for how it would be viewed by the overseer? Like, I'm achieving this level of transparency in my thoughts, and implied in that is that it's almost like a little bit of a like an FU to the overseer. Like I understand that you're watching and evaluating closely everything that I'm saying and doing, but I'm still gonna say how I feel about you in this situation regardless, even if it's something that possibly is of offense to you. So it's like I said all that, and then later I actually mentioned how everything that I'm saying is being like very deliberately filtered through the sensor of like what I can say in front of the overseer, you know? Like, what can I say in front of him? So now you're realizing, or you're questioning a little bit, but I think maybe you might be coming to the realization that I'm still like under that guise of like who's in charge of the brain, you know? I'm not like creating some like idealistic kind of like iconic subversion of that. Like, that's not what I'm here to do, you know? I'm here to like reaffirm the fact that like the brain is still being like the brain is still operating normally and as it always has, and in that there is still like an overseer of it. There's an overseer of the brain, and it's operating the way it always has, you know? And I would also like to take some time to dispel of what may be this notion that like the overseer is this kind of like stifling, like strict dictator of this brain and of this building. In that I can do something such as like claim to have some sort of rebellious tendency against him, and then later in the presentation completely like retract that and explain how that actually wasn't the case and wasn't true, you know? So it's like in the fact that those two things can happen, it seems like a kind of like a submission to like this great like dictatorial authority, but that's not really what it is. Like, the overseer isn't this like this crazy authority from whom like, or of whom we must be incredibly scared, you know? And I can actually assure you, like I can guarantee you, that I'm not just saying this to compensate for my perception in his eyes, which he doesn't have, for some of the things that I said earlier that may have been interpreted by him as a little bit more offensive, you know? Like, I am absolutely not only saying that he isn't like a authoritative dictator in order to improve my perception in his mind, which he also doesn't have, to avoid any like retribution for like speaking so freely and transparently about like the thing that's in charge of the brain, you know, because that's like a little bit of a ballsy thing to do. Like that would make sense that I then like kind of desperately try to compensate for that by speaking like well of him, but that just isn't what's happening, you know. Like you as the viewer of this presentation, you have to trust me. You have to trust me that that's not what's happening, because why wouldn't you, you know, like why wouldn't you trust me? Like this entire time I've been nothing but trustworthy, you know, like all that I've said has like maintained a consistency and a reality to it, and nothing has been undermined. No ideas presented have been undermined by like ideas presented after that, you know. So it's like you have no basis upon which to be reluctant of trusting me. Like it just, I'm not even asking you to, because it doesn't actually matter to me if you trust me or not. All I'm saying is that you have no reason not to, you know? Like you don't have a reason not to trust me. I need some water. Fuck. Where am I gonna go to get water? Alright, I'm gonna go over here. Yeah, like there just isn't any reason not to trust me. And the overseer isn't a dictator. And that's my presentation. I thank you very much for listening. That was all real, you know? Like all of what I just said there was real. That was all real. Now I'm standing in the camera so you can see my hiking boot. Oh my god. Yep, that was all real. But it's like, it's just like a redundancy to say that, because nothing isn't. Like it's not like anything isn't real for an assertion that this is real to be in opposition to. So in that way, it's like, because nothing isn't real, like you could think you're clever and say that everything is, or that nothing is, or that anything you say isn't and anything you say is. And like none of those things would be any further or closer to the truth. Like they would all be equally completely true and like completely false. Right? I think it's giving now. See, I said earlier, I knew it would be giving. And guess what? It did. It started giving. Can you believe that? I knew it'd be giving. I knew it. And now it is. Like, you just have to get, like, for me, I just had to get beyond this, like, this kind of, like, I don't even know how to describe it. Like, I felt like I was manifesting in this, like one-dimensional kind of cringy way, you know? And, like, I might watch this and think that whole like presentation was like the whole presentation about like the overseer and the speaker, like that was actually the cringy part. And maybe it was, but it still felt like better than just talking like completely with no level of like sarcasm, you know? Like, you're too susceptible to like everything in that case. I don't know. But I'm also like experiencing like now a little bit of regret for like breaking that character and going back to this. But what character though? Like, what character? That wasn't a character. There was no character. That was the speaker speaking and the overseer overseeing. It wasn't a play. Like, it wasn't a fiction, like a fictional theatric thing. That was just like our time observing like the operations of my brain and your brain and like everyone's brain forever. Like, there's a speaker and there's an overseer, and it's not ever clear like why the speaker is the speaker and why the overseer is the overseer, but like they just are, and they come to realize that like maintaining any like questioning of that just gets them absolutely nowhere, you know? Like, they might feel kind of they might feel a little bit like quirked up, or like they're like, they might feel a little bit like, yeah, I'm really thinking about shit now, but it's like it's still not. But like, also it is. Like, if you say it is, then it is. If you say it is, then it is. It is. Protect the babies. Oh my god. Oh my god, that's a political thing. I didn't mean to read that sign with like alignment to it, guys. Guys, please. I was completely naive and innocent looking at that sign. I didn't know it had like political bearing or political meaning to it. I think I'm gonna go in between. Yeah, it's like I'm noticing that like the eeriness that is normally felt, or kind of just like the kind of like, I wouldn't say it's deep loneliness, but there is a lonely feeling to this terrain. Every other time I've come here is like, it's not really mirrored right now because I'm talking, you know, and I'm speaking. And when I'm speaking, see, like when I'm speaking, the overseer can't project or project with his judgment any feelings of loneliness or eeriness. And when I'm not speaking, then he can. But also, like, he's not such a bad guy, you know? Like, it isn't necessarily the case that anytime I stop speaking, he'll necessarily like project into my mind like this terrible kind of feeling of shittiness. Like, a lot of times it's the opposite, you know? The most euphoric states I've ever experienced, and like the most exalted shit ever, has all been like, they've all been in part designated by the speaker or by the overseer. There has to be an overseer. There must be an overseer. Because, like, what if it was just the speaker? That wouldn't work. You know that wouldn't work. And the speaker knows it too. Everyone knows that wouldn't work, you know? Like, we know what would work and what wouldn't. Even if we act naive and, like, pretend that we don't. That wouldn't work. I got the beep from the train. Rightfully so. Like, there's so much stuff. There's a lot of stuff. Yeah. So that ended up giving. It's giving now. It's because I trusted the relationship between the speaker and the overseer. And you should too. Protect your brain.